Before we begin, I'd like to make a quick shout out to our $5 Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you liked the video, and if you didn't like the video, please have the decency to let me know why you didn't like it. Thanks. It's the most wonderful time of the year. There'll be much mistletoeing and hearts will be glowing when loved ones are near. It's the most wonderful time of the year.
How dare you disrespect Thanksgiving in my home by singing Christmas songs before I've had my turkey. Cease and desist.
That guy's a lawyer, you don't want to cross him. Yeah, I know we're all sick of the holiday season creeping ever earlier into the year like some sort of malignant tumor, with Halloween being the only thing stopping it from consuming the entire year. But all the same, there's just something so wonderfully nostalgic about the holiday season. And if you're like me, you like to sit down and watch all the many movies and specials centered around the holiday. It's a Wonderful Life, A Christmas Carol, those Rankin Bass stop-motion specials, they're all great. But there's one special in particular that causes all who hear its name to tremble. That accursed blight upon the holiday world. There's a Star Wars holiday special. This thing is infamous. It aired once in 1978 and then never again. George Lucas himself was quoted as saying that if he had the time and a sledgehammer, he'd track down and destroy every copy of this thing in existence. It's gone down in history as one of the worst things to ever bear the Star Wars name. Heck, one of the worst things on television in general. Everyone involved in its creation regrets doing it. Seriously, if you watch it in slow motion, you can pinpoint the exact second Harrison Ford realizes what a monumental mistake he's made. As some of you may know, I'm a pretty decent Star Wars fan. I grew up watching the movies all the time, and to this day, I absolutely adore them. And by that, I mean I adore 3 through 6 and half of 8. But Star Wars occupies a special place in my heart, despite the fact that I literally only like half the movies. And as some of you might also know, last year I got together with a couple friends and sat down to riff some of the worst Christmas specials of all time, and we endured some grade A trash. But then we got to the Star Wars holiday special and we actually kind of enjoyed it. Now I'd like to clarify, it's bad. It's really bad. But I really don't think its reputation as the worst thing ever is warranted, since there are things about the special I honestly do enjoy, and I feel like there's a half-decent special buried deep beneath this garbage that warrants defending. That's right, I'm about to unironically defend the Star Wars Holiday Special. Now, again, I'm under no illusions that this is good, because it really isn't. On that note, I should go over why it failed so hard before I talk about the ways it could have worked, as well as the one or two bits of it that do work. So allow me to give you a brief recap of what this special generously passes off as a plot. It's Life Day, a holiday celebrated by the Wookiees on Kashyyyk, and our old friends Han Solo and Chewbacca are on their way to celebrate the holiday, but are delayed by some Imperial pursuers. Meanwhile, we're introduced to Chewbacca's family, his wife Mala, his pervy old dad Itchy, and last but not least, his son Lumpy. Just look at this horrible little gremlin, I love him. They're worried that Chewbacca hasn't shown up yet and might be in danger, but while they're worrying, the Empire shows up to search the place because they suspect it for rebel activity. From that point, stuff just kind of happens until Han Solo shows up to save the day, and then the Wookiees are all part of a cult, I guess, and they walk into the Christmas light. The end. So what exactly is it that makes this special so infamously bad? Well, most of the critiques that I've seen tend to focus more on the surface level stuff, like the long periods of untranslated Wookiee speak. But if I'm going to defend the special, I'm going to need to get to the root of its problems in the first place, and on that note, I've narrowed it down to two major causes. Problem number 1, the format. George Lucas originally wrote this as a standard, fun little Star Wars romp centered around Life Day that would have seen Chewbacca taking center stage. But the network instead took the idea, chucked it into a wood chipper, and decided instead to inflict a variety sketch show on us. So the above plot was more or less just a thinly veiled vehicle to deliver a bunch of unrelated segments, and the whole thing is more or less held together by duct tape and prayer. And these segments are unbelievably inconsistent, ranging from almost decent to depressingly unfunny to dear sweet merciful Arceus, who thought this was a good idea? And if that were all that there was to it, it wouldn't be that bad. Oh, who am I kidding? Of course it would have. But it would have been at least tolerable if it weren't for problem number 2. the length. As if the special wasn't bad enough, the network executives, in their infinite wisdom, decided that they had to stretch out something that could probably fill 45 minutes all the way out to an hour and a half. So not only were the sketches cringeworthy and unfunny, but they drag on for what feels like an eternity. The absolute worst of these sketches comes near the end, where Lumpy's putting together a machine and watches the instructional video how to do so. The instruction video is presented by an artificial life form identified as an Amorphian, played by Harvey Korman. And not only does he give the most lifeless, monotone, robotic performance imaginable for such an unbelievably mundane subject matter, but there's this... I hesitate to call it a joke. There's this reoccurrence that he keeps malfunctioning and he either gets trapped in a painfully obvious video loop or tries fixing himself, resulting in my nightmares for tonight. And it just goes on forever.
Find the sealed package containing all the tools you'll need. Ah.
I do have to wonder, these Amorphians are machines, right? Their entire planet is populated by them, I'd assume. Who built them? How is their society not completely collapsed the way they malfunction every 12 seconds? Do they all look like Harvey Korman? Actually, now I'm genuinely curious. Let me check the wiki. Okay, so the wiki had absolutely no information aside from the special, since apart from a brief offhand mention in some Clone Wars novella, they never appeared in anything else. Good. The second worst segment is this cooking show, also hosted by Harvey Korman, who this time is dressed up as Zaphod Beeblebrox wearing drag, as well as the butt wig from Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. I think he's doing an impression of some cooking show host who was popular in the 70s. Heck if I know what he's going for. All I know is it ain't funny in the slightest.
Now, today, I'm going to be using the tenderest cut of the bantha, the loin.
Ugh. Something about the delivery on that just unnerves me. Hey, here's a thought. If banthas are used in cooking scenarios like this, then that makes them the Star Wars equivalent of cows, right? Well, the Sand People consider banthas to be sacred to their culture, so does that make the Sand People Hindu? Sorry for getting on all these lore tangents. It's the only thing keeping me from collapsing my skull out of boredom. The third worst segment involves Itchy. By the way, Itchy, Lumpy, Mala's short for malaria. Chewbacca's family are all named after symptoms of mosquito bites. Anyway, this segment is all about Itchy, Chewbacca's crusty old dad who's like 1,000 years old, watching porn. I wish I was making that up.
We are excited, aren't we? Well, just relax. Just relax. Yeah. A little more. Now, we can have a good time.
Good night, everybody.
Just be grateful that we can't see the lower half of his body. What's funny here is that apparently the original plan was going to be way more explicit, but the network executives, in a rare moment of sanity, put the kibosh on that. Not that it really saved anything, mind you. By the way, these things that you see in the video, am I the only one who thinks they look kinda familiar? I swear these are those same guys who performed in that water opera when Palpatine was telling Anakin,
"The tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise."
So you're telling me that these guys went from performing opera in the galactic capital to being extras in a porno. Geez, Palpatine's economic policies must have been terrible if they got that desperate. All of this is tied together by a shoestring budget, complete with some of the worst green screen effects I have ever seen. And the music is just terrible. It has the same tune as the movies, but the instruments they use sound like stuff you'd hear on The Muppet Show. You know what? Let's compare. Let's play music from this special and music from The Muppet Show back to back. Absolutely uncanny, isn't it? Now, I could go on and on about every single minor issue with this special, from Mark Hamill looking like a Ken doll to Carrie Fisher being high as a kite the entire time. But you know what? I came here to defend the Star Wars Holiday Special. It's in the title, and that's what I am going to do. So without further ado, let's begin by talking about the 3 segments of this special that I would classify as passable. First up, we have this trippy music video by Jefferson Starship. You get it? It's because they're called Starship. nothing noteworthy, but you know what? Decent music is decent music, no matter what it's in. Second, and probably the most famous thing associated with this thing, is this animated cartoon featuring the Star Wars cast on a good old space adventure. Now, this cartoon raises a whole plethora of questions, ranging from things like, how is there a Saturday morning cartoon about an organization which, let's face it, is full of terrorists, to things like, what the heck is Dr. Robotnik doing in Star Wars?
Snooping as usual, I see.
As you can plainly see, the animation in this special is weird. I hesitate to say it's bad because it's honestly really, really fluid, but at the same time, it's a little too fluid. I mean, there's squash and stretch, and then there's R2-D2 suddenly being made out of jello.
Which I think might be an improvement.
Not to mention, Han Solo looks like an Easter Island head. An Easter Island head who should never be allowed to smile ever again. But there's a reason that this cartoon is so famous. When the crew crash lands on this planet of marinara sauce, they're attacked by a monster from a toothpaste commercial, but just in the nick of time, they're rescued by... That's right, this cartoon was the first ever appearance of our Lord and Savior, Boba Fett. He offers to help our heroes find the MacGuffin that they're fighting over. I don't know, I wasn't really paying attention. But it turns out that he's a plant by Darth Vader to lure the heroes into a trap.
Boba Fett is Darth Vader's right-hand man.
No, he isn't. This line is just so bizarre to me, but at the same time, it's a fascinating window into a time when Star Wars didn't really know what it wanted to be. Even keeping in mind that this was before Palpatine was introduced proper into canon and Vader was still more or less the main villain, since when is Boba Fett loyal specifically to the Empire, let alone being Vader's right-hand man? But you know what? It's a fun, campy space adventure who introduced one of the most iconic characters into the canon, to the point that The Mandalorian almost definitely took more than its fair share of influence from it. And even if the animation is a tad unsettling, bad animation alone does not a bad cartoon make. See also Hoodwinked. Great movie, terrible animation. And then we get to my absolute favorite part of the special. The Cantina segment starring B. Arthur. This segment centers around a bartender at the Mos Eisley Cantina named Akmena, played by the late, great B. Arthur. Like, this woman is a national treasure, and she brings such a no-nonsense attitude to this role.
Of course we can talk. We are talking. You're not ordering, I'm not pouring, we are not drinking, we are talking.
But while she's busy fending off the advances of this horrible Kappa man who drinks through a hole in the top of his head, the Empire shows up and shuts the cantina down. I have to wonder if this order came all the way from Palpatine, though. Like, was he just sitting around in Coruscant going, "Yes, soon B. Arthur will be crushed, and the cantina will be turned to the dark side"? Or maybe he did this because he wants B. Arthur for himself. Can't say I blame him. So anyway, this gets the patrons of the bar upset, to the point that I half expect them to get up and start singing the French national anthem. Or maybe they're gonna do this.
Break the dishes and smash the plates, that's what B. Arthur hates.
What follows is a surreal musical number where B. Arthur musically begs the patrons to get the heck out of her bar to the tune of the famous cantina music. And all joking aside, the song isn't actually that bad.
Just one more song, friend, and then so long, friend. The nights get shorter, it seems.
And here's another fun fact. Akmena here would eventually be re-added into the new canon in 2016 by one of those Star Wars complete guides, and then appeared in the 2017 anthology book From a Certain Point of View. So I'm glad that the best part of the special is being recognized at least, and I can guarantee you, if B. Arthur were still around, Jon Favreau absolutely would have got her back for The Mandalorian. Hey, remember the time B. Arthur told Satan to get out of her bar? Those are the 3 skits that I actually quite like from this special, but there's more to this thing that I think goes underappreciated. For example, much has been said about the first 15 minutes, which is nothing but an uninterrupted cavalcade of Wookiee roaring without subtitles. Is it grating? Oh good heavens, yes, but credit where credit is due, the people in the Wookiee costumes aren't doing the worst job. I mean, not that it fixes the assault on my eardrums, but just by paying attention to their body language, you really can tell more or less what they're saying. One of the major reoccurring characters is this guy right here, who's played by Art Carney and has a name so inconsistent that not even the wiki knows how to spell it. I absolutely love this guy. He's an undercover operative for the Rebellion who gets intel by running a corny little gift shop in Empire territory. I just think that's a hilarious concept for a character, and honestly, he's one of the only performances in this thing I actually enjoy. Just look at how desperate he is not to get himself killed by the stormtroopers he's distracting.
The picture you're looking at right now was taken quite a few years ago. That's one of me. I've gained quite a bit of weight since then.
Or maybe that's just Art Carney realizing this thing's gonna be on his resume for the rest of his life. You can never really tell. And Lumpy. I love this horrible little goblin. Heck, given the way the main plot progresses, he's more or less the main character. I just said out loud that the main character's name is Lumpy. What am I doing with my life? But I think he's likable enough. You really do get the sense that he idolizes his hero father, and he takes an active role in trying to fend off the Imperial Gestapo. More on them later. Weirdly enough, I actually found myself really caring about this walking pile of that stuff my cat keeps coughing up. There's this one scene where the Empire tears apart his room during their search and winds up decapitating this stuffed bantha he owns, and the kid actually goes and lays his toy to rest afterwards. Like, I know this is all incredibly silly, but bear in mind, this kid is like, what, 6? No joke, I bought his connection to that stuffed bantha more than I bought the relationship between Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman in the prequels. Though, admittedly, that's not that high of a bar.
This is outrageous. It's unfair.
Now, this first realization was kind of a slow burn, but throughout my first viewing, I had a series of thoughts that went sort of like this. If they made the special just a couple years later, these would all be Ewoks. If they made the special just a couple years later, that lady'd be a Twi'lek instead of whatever the heck she's supposed to be. If they made the special just a couple years later, this would all be about Palpatine trying to cancel Life Day or something. And that's when it dawned on me. This special was made at a point before anyone knew if Star Wars was going to stick around. Of course, now it's a worldwide phenomenon, but back then, all we really had was the first movie. And yet, despite being a shallow, cheaply made attempt to cash in on the film's popularity on the off chance it was just a fad, it made a legitimate attempt to do some world building for the universe back when they only had the first movie to work with. Now granted, it failed miserably on that front. I would love to see how the heck the new canon would attempt to justify the Amorphians, but I think it's impressive that it even made the attempt. Heck, this special was the first appearance of the Wookiee homeworld Kashyyyk.
Due to suspected rebel activity on the Kazook planet.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kazook. As depicted by this lovely piece of concept art to keep cutting to, and heck, they continue to use this general look for the planet for all of its future appearances, from Knights of the Old Republic to Revenge of the Sith. But there's one thing that... I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm alone on this, maybe I'm seeing things that aren't really there, but if you can only take one thing away from this video, it's this. The Star Wars Holiday Special is one of the most blatantly Nazi-esque portrayals of the Empire across all Star Wars media. That's not to say they weren't effective in the movies. They were clearly a monolithic fascist dictatorship feared across the galaxy with multiple genocides under their belt. And yeah, a lot of their evil in the special is really watered down and petty.
Go clean up your room.
But all joking aside, really think about it. In most pieces of Star Wars media, we usually see them through the lens of the Rebellion, the heroes who fight against them in the titular Star Wars. But when had we ever seen the Empire from the perspective of someone just living under the thumb of Imperial occupation? Just the daily grind of living in a world ruled by this old prune and his army of bucketheads. Yes, Luke did technically live under Imperial rule, but we never really got the sense that the Empire played a major role in his family's life until they came hunting for those droids. And the only other civilized planet we see in the original trilogy is Bespin, and in that case the Empire just recently showed up. But here, it's obvious that the Imperial presence on Kashyyyk,
on the Kazook planet,
whatever, we really do get the sense that they've been a constant part of the Baka family's life for quite some time. The House has installed two-way communication with the local Imperial governor so the guy can constantly violate their privacy, and it's implied that these are standard issue for every home on the planet. There's this clashing aesthetic between traditional, lovingly crafted Wookiee woodwork and then a bunch of really mundane, cold kitchen appliances that imply an economic takeover. There's this thinly veiled level of disgust and condescension this officer has to these weird, non-human things.
We don't want to have to hurt anyone. That's not what we're here for. But when my men get angry, I can't always control them.
I made a comparison earlier to the Gestapo, and that's what these guys clearly are. They're obviously meant to invoke that comparison, tearing apart the house looking for signs of rebel activity the same way the Gestapo hunted for Jews. Are you hiding any Jedi in your basement? I absolutely love it whenever the series doubles down on the Nazi imagery for the Empire. See also the Nazi gold analog in The Mandalorian. And to tell you the truth, I feel like the childish pettiness of the Empire actually does kinda help them. You see, there's this episode of Terrible Writing Advice that talks about this. If you want to make your audience hate your villains, don't just make them commit bigger and bigger atrocities with higher body counts. We as humans tend to respond more to directed personal attacks rather than widespread atrocities. The bigger and more extreme an act of evil is, the more we tend to write it off as just kind of a statistic and don't really consider it a tragedy. To make an example of my point, look at The Force Awakens. The destruction of the Hosnian system was supposed to be a huge deal, but I didn't care one bit, and I don't think anyone else did either. I actually had to look up the name of the planet they blew up, that's how little I cared. Really, I could go on and on about how the First Order are the lamest and shallowest Star Wars villains ever, but that's for another day. So seeing these small, petty acts of contempt really does a lot to characterize the Empire, and again, does a good deal to make them resemble the Nazis. But there's even more to it than that, and I figure I might as well end on something a bit more positive. You see, Life Day has this reputation among Star Wars fans for being their equivalent of Christmas, but the original special implies that it's strictly a Wookiee holiday. And yet, despite this, the special ends with Leia giving this speech about togetherness, the celebration of other cultures, and how the connections we make are vital to standing up against oppression and fascism. Which, if I'm being honest, is a pretty profound message. It's a Wookiee holiday, and the humans don't really have any connection to it, but they embrace the tradition anyway simply because Chewbacca is their friend. Granted, the point could have been carried across a little better, and Carrie Fisher was clearly high as a kite during the speech, but all the same, it's a weirdly wholesome note for the special to end on. And more than anything else, the message about banding together and accepting one another's cultures in the face of oppression is why I can't bring myself to write this special off like so many other people do. It's tonally disjointed, unfunny, poorly paced, cringe-inducing, and irritating, yeah, but there was something here, real potential buried under all of this garbage, and I think it warrants actual discussion instead of just sweeping it all under the rug and making a joke about it. The new Disney canon seems a lot more willing to reference the special, and you know what? Good for them. Maybe I'm talking out of my rear here. Maybe I just tend to be more merciful towards things that have had troubled productions. Maybe I'm giving this thing too much credit for merely trying. If you think that this special is an abomination that needs to be burned and forgotten, that's fine. It's your opinion. I just wanted to get mine out there, and the things that redeem the special, in my opinion, aren't going to save it for everybody. And I get that. But in the spirit of the holiday, we can at least unify ourselves over one thing. No matter how bad the special is, no matter how embarrassing it is, no matter how much it may have damaged the Star Wars brand, at least it's still better than Rise of Skywalker.